Harper, and with me, as always, is the amazing Donna Karlin. Donna, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. I'm super excited about this because this is a topic that was raised by a listener.
Yes.
That is so cool.
Yeah, and we definitely appreciate it. I want to say a quick shout out to Bill for putting this in front of us. And this is interesting because I know a little bit of the backstory. So we're going to kind of explore this because we can look at it from a couple of different angles. But the original question that was posed was how to be heard when no one is listening. And I'm like, oh, okay. Are we talking about your kids? Are we talking about your spouse? Are we talking about me? I mean, what are we talking about? And so I got an opportunity to hear the real challenge is that he works in an organization that has a boss that doesn't really take into account their leadership team's perspective. And the boss is really struggling to listen to anything that they're putting forward. And it's created a pretty chaotic work environment. His fear is that people are becoming so frustrated that they might see people starting to leave, and he doesn't really want to see that happen. And so and including himself doesn't want to necessarily have to leave the job. He likes the work, he likes the company, just doesn't like the environment that this leader has created. And so there you have it. So that it's an interesting conversation because it is how to be heard when no one is listening, especially your boss.
Yeah. I think people could sort of add, especially when it's your spouse, your boss, your kids, whatever they're dealing with,
Yeah, fill in the blank.
fill in the blank. Thanks, Bill, for bringing this to us. I'm not quite sure we're going to share with you what you want to hear. Um, so I'm throwing that out.
Yeah.
In my experience,
Well,
there's
to that
multiple.
point, throwing this out, I mean, like our last episode, some advice is good advice, and otherwise,
um, recommendation. There's a book that I suggest that maybe would help, and that's Solving Tough Problems by Adam Kahane. He talks about listening distinctions. And what I'm hearing from what Steve's just shared is that right now you're in the middle of the dialogue of the deaf. In other words, the individual only listens to confirm what they already know, has no interest in hearing your point of view whatsoever, and it's not even a dialogue. It really is a dialogue of the deaf, somebody who has no listening capacity.
yeah.
I mean, there's so many ways to deal with this, right? Like I've had 40, almost 41 years experience working in an organizational context. I've seen this happen so many times and it's painful to watch. I'll be very honest. I've seen the head of HR literally be so miserable that 60% of the staff walked. Consider that. It was horrendous because of her demeanor. There was no ifs, ands, or buts. If you're considering leaving or there might be a mass exodus, then my question to you is what do you have to lose by not confronting in a conflicting way, but to confront the issue with your boss? If you have some face time with the boss, start with questions. What is it you want to achieve with your leadership team? Do you want to enable us all to be the best and give our best? In which case, this is what we would need from you in order for that to happen. And then you go into the consultative perspective. When you say to somebody, you're not listening to me, they're not going to listen to you. They're going to block you out because that is a direct
Mm-hmm.
attack on their listening skills. A, you might not know if he's aware of the fact that he tunes you out. If he does tune you out on purpose, then chances are he's going to continue to do that unless he sees something is in his best interest not to do that anymore. So if you start off with this is what we need from you, and part of that is being heard. And then not only being heard, but to have that percolating conversation after we share our opinion. So collectively, we come up with a plan of action that we partly own. When we partly own it, we're going to dive in and do it better
Mm-hmm.
because we were part of the decision making process. there's many ways of doing it. The question is he interested?
Yeah. Yeah, it's I think that's a really valuable point that you make there, and I think that might be hard advice for some people. I don't know about Bill. I think he's a pretty assertive individual. I think he could step up to the plate to have that conversation. But I'm curious about your perspective on someone who's like, well, I've done my best. I've tried to bring my topics up, or I've made my strategy suggestions, or I've done my effort on this project, and the boss still is not listening to me, and I don't feel like I don't have the standing necessarily to be able to raise that. Maybe how would you approach that? Would you still suggest that somebody into that conversation with with confidence enough to raise this, that you're because you're trying to not be confrontational, but no matter probably what happens, the boss is going to perceive it as a confrontational conversation. So how do you do that when you're not maybe you're not on the same level as the boss, you don't have that executive power behind you? What might you recommend there?
Remember, the boss is only as powerful as the people that support him or her.
Yep, exactly.
If the boss does not have support of his or her people, then that person is not a leader. They're not leading anybody because nobody's following.
Sure.
That's the first thing. So there are recourses. If it's a corporation, for example, or a fair sized company, there's going to be an HR department where you could go and actually ask for some kind of mediation or advocacy. And people tend not to want to do that because it escalates it. If there's a possibility of a skip level meeting to meet with that person's boss, and a lot of companies do that, to say, we're struggling with this and we would really like your help. We don't want him or her to get a 2x4 to the side of the head as much as turn around and actually listen and have some active listening skills that, they engage with us. Because I'm afraid that there's going to be a mass exodus and that's not going to serve anybody. So to have that kind of conversation. Another way to approach this is, and this takes guts, granted, you walk in and Steve, I'm going to use you as my guinea pig because it's so easy to use my guinea pig. Steve, what exactly do you want to hear from me? And then say silent. And the boss is not going to expect that, right? The boss is going to expect you to report out about something or say what the status is of something. Instead, what do you really want to hear from me? And if the boss says, well, I want to know the status of this, happy to give you this status. And then I would like some direction as to if I go this way or this way. What my sense is that we go this way. Do you agree? And what you're going to do is steer the conversation in a way that he would look like a moron not to respond. If you say, what do you want to really hear from me? And they go, well, what do you have? That's not helping me support you in the initiatives.
Yeah.
What do you need to hear from me? And then I'm happy to provide it. If you're asking him to target what you're going to share with him, and then you share it and he doesn't listen, I'm not going to say what's going on in my mind right now about what that person might be. Then it'll give you some indication of whether or not there's hope.
I think that's excellent. I think that the assumption that was put forward was that this would have to be raised in a group setting, and I love how you went there, because I went there with him, and I said, no, this is more of a one-on-one situation.
Oh,
I love how
yeah.
you phrase this. What do you want to hear from me? There's a book that I recommended to Bill that he read, because I've really enjoyed reading. It's called "Shut the F Up." It's by Dan Lyons, and it's an excellent book because really, at the end of the day, there's a power dynamic that tends to happen in leadership, and in this situation, the the situation where they feel like they're not being listened to tends to happen in a group environment where all the good ideas get put on the conference room table only to be shut down or said they're dumb or whatever the put down of the day might be by this leader. And what I expressed was that's bully behavior, right? At the end of the day, he's trying to exude power and authority, and then he's the smartest person in the room, and challenging him in that group only would create a dynamic that probably will be even more uncomfortable, right, for everybody. But one on one, like you suggest, what do you really want to hear from me? And this is what I think, and this is where I think we should go. But what do you think? Brings you on the same side of the desk. Maybe they don't even recognize it at that point, but you're actually allowing yourself to create into a collaborative conversation. And
Yeah.
because you are the only person in the room, it's impossible to be distracted by other people and perceptions of this power and authority that leaders often, they sort of crave. Because when you only have an audience of one, you can only be an audience of one. And you're forcing that person to be engaged in a more direct interaction. And when you're creating a conversation, leveraging an approach to the dialogue where you're leading them down the path to, like you said, you'd be a moron to not go that direction. They, if they have a sense of power and control that they want in a public arena, like a conference room, boardroom, or whatever, um, they want to look like they are one of the smarter people that, that everybody respects and admires. There's an ego at play. And when you can sort of help them guide down the path of making the right decision based on true information, true knowledge, your experience, you're not doing it in a threatening way. Now you're catching their eye because now they're going to look all that much better when they agree in the public setting, or this is what, Donna and I have come up with, in terms of the approach that we should take for the next quarter or for this project, or whatever the case might be. But you're making a social deposit, whether you recognize it or not. If that leader is really not at their core an evil, SOB, right? you are potentially guiding them to have a more collaborative, engaged conversation about whatever you're in there to talk about. And you're sort of creating a safe environment for them to get away from the ego and actually be in a more of a collaborative, sort of environment. And I think that can have a really positive impact if they are not an egomaniac or control freak, and they actually have a human heart in there, which
Right.
not all leaders do. Let's just be honest, right?
What's fascinating is depending on how that conversation goes, if there really is a give and take in that conversation, as you end it, first of all, definitely thank your boss, the manager. I don't like to use the word leader because this person doesn't sound like
No,
he
not
or
a
she.
leader. Yeah,
Um, Thank them for the conversation and then end it with, I really look forward to bringing this into the conference room for our next team meeting so we collectively discuss what it'll look like to implement. And thank you for your leadership in this. This
yeah,
be very specific so that what they're doing is getting the positive reinforcement for that percolating conversation that you had. And then you could bring it out to the rest of the team in the conference room. If the person reverts to being a jerk, then that again is an indicator. You can go back in on your one-on-one and say, it would have been phenomenal if we had taken our previous conversation into the conference room to percolate as a team, and you
yeah,
shut that down. So the effect of that is people are starting to shut down, and I'm sure that's not what you want.
right, right, right.
So, and you just leave it there. You don't say, I'll help you. You don't say what he should do, because should is a trigger word. Tung fu, here we go. It's this is what is currently happening. So it's the truth of the situation. I can only assume that's not what you want.
Yeah.
In which case, I suggest that you look at ways to turn that around and you just leave the meeting.
Hmm.
That's it. Whether or not he takes your advice, as we said the last time, might toss it. He might ruminate about it and say, maybe I need to listen. This is now not good for me if the person is egotistical, not good for me if the staff starts exiting. They'll give exit interviews and it's going to be on me.
Yeah.
So this is not the way I want things to go. And maybe it'll be the shock them into reality type of situation. I hope this is helpful, Bill, and that you get something out of it that you could use.
Yeah, and well, and just to clarify why I raised that book is that sometimes, when you have an audience, you can exude power. When you're on one, it's harder. And so the ability for you to guide and direct a very respectful yet more directed conversation at that boss to, uh, you know, this is the direction I think we should go. This is why. What do you think? And bring them into that collaborative, engaged conversation, but you keep your mouth shut and don't create, you don't create a two-way dialogue, but you give them space to communicate. I think that's why that book is kind of interesting is you look for the opportunities to share what you need to share, but you also give the other person the space and the opportunity to share where their thoughts are. And if you can create a co-collaborative kind of environment in terms of conversation, well, then that's all the more value that you bring to the table. And I think you'll know based on, and this isn't a magic formula, obviously, it's going to take some time. But the
Yeah.
other piece of advice that I would give on this is acknowledge them for the time that you did. I really appreciate you taking time to listen to me. I really feel like you heard what my concern was or what my issue is. You guide people down the path that you want them to really get on. And I think part of that is sometimes, and especially in Donna, I know you've seen this, people get promoted to their level of incompetence. They think that there's a perception of how they are supposed to lead, how they're supposed to function and act in a certain role and responsibility. And sometimes people do it because they don't know any better. And so if we are wanting to change, be a part of that change, well, then you got to try and incentivize them in some capacity to exude the type of behavior that you're looking for, which is to be more collaborative, more engaged, a more serious listener of the ideas that are being put forward. Maybe you have to train them one on one before they go into the arena. But if you do it enough, you can actually help them alter their behavior. But they need their treats. They need their prizes. It's like, if you want Shadow to sit and shake hands, I mean, Shadow will do it, but you better give the Scooby treat after after he does it, right? So there's an aspect of that, and you'll find pretty quickly when you can praise somebody if they take it and they may not necessarily express it back, but how they respond to it when you do offer up that level of praise and appreciation for what they're doing or at least trying, that can change the entire dynamic of your relationship with that boss and maybe their relationship with your other teammates.
One of the questions I ask, and if the boss was listening, I would love for his boss to hear this. How do you want the person to feel at the end of the conversation?
Yep.
Chances are the boss is not going to be listening to our podcast, but if Bill is, that applies to you too.
Yep.
Because if you say before you walk into his office or her office, how do I want that person to feel at the end of the conversation? The last thing you ever want that person to feel, hopefully, is shame.
Mm-hmm.
That you demean them in such a way that they will lash out and lash back because nobody likes to be shamed.
Right.
So if you want the boss to feel leadership like, craft your conversation so that you are operating from integrity without any expectation of getting what you want in return. Because you have the experience of this individual, we don't.
Yeah.
Still, walk in with absolute professional integrity. Ask yourself, how do I want him or her to feel at the end of the conversation? And frame your conversation in such a way that they feel like a leader. And invite them in some subtle way, or I call it sneaky 101, to expect that there will be more of that to come.
Yeah. Great point.
Maybe, just maybe, they'll start shifting their behavior to one of more of a listener.
We could hope for sure. Or, just secretly, put on his desk, that you need to tune into Inquiring Minds to learn how to lead. Just say it's from anonymous. I don't know, but we definitely appreciate this topic. Thank you, Bill, for raising it. We want to encourage all of our listeners. I mean, what's great about these conversations is we've come to the table with these different perspectives, these different quotes, these different, ideas, which is kicking off a whole new litany of other questions that are being raised by our listeners. So we want to hear from you because, if you've got something that's a challenging, work environment, or you're struggling in your own leadership journey, or you've got questions about a dynamic of a relationship, or questions that you need to be asking, this would be the opportunity for you to put that forward so that we could
Yeah.
actually cover these in a future episode. So Donna, how can they get in touch with us or get engaged in conversation around these topics?
The best way is to join our Facebook group, Inquiring Minds with Donna, Karlin, and Steve Harper. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and comment through there. Our Facebook page really, though, is a place where we can have great conversations. And we welcome your 3 cents and your ideas and your thoughts. It's really terrific to see more and more people joining the group. Some of them are messaging us privately. It would be great if you shared, though, with our community so that they could learn from your wisdom as well. One thing that I wanted to share that I don't know if we've shared before, we tape a few shows at the same time because we never want you to be without an Inquiring Mind show. And we both travel for work, and one of these days we'll actually take vacation. So this ensures that you always have a show to listen to. So, to that effect, when you share your ideas with us, it might not be the next week's show after that you share that idea. It might be down the road. And if we know you personally, we'll let you know when that show will happen. Otherwise, you could always listen to our past shows through the Facebook page or our YouTube channel. So make yourself welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. We definitely appreciate everybody tuning in, whether you're tuning in via YouTube, Facebook, or on any of the podcast platforms. We're so grateful for you and your time and your attention. So we will be back again with another episode of Inquiring Minds very soon. But until then, Donna, have a great rest of your day.
You too.